I am not encouraging anybody to download copyright protected content. Always reference your local laws when it comes to this matter. The host of this video nor TechHut Media LLC condone piracy in any way, shape, or form. In this video, I'm going to show you probably the best way to download stuff. And we're going to be doing that with an automated torrent media server featuring the help of Sonarr, Radarr, Prowlarr, qBittorrent, Gluetun, and much more. This is part 3 of a multiple part series that I'm doing going over the ultimate server setup, but even if you are not following that video, this is going to be a good one to follow. You could just start here. All you're going to need is a Linux server and Docker installed, and you can go right on ahead. Now, a basic understanding of Docker is a prerequisite for this video. I do recommend this written kind of overview of the basics, how to install it, all the different commands, networking volumes, so on and so forth. For this video, I'm going to be doing this in a Ubuntu virtual machine within Proxmox, but again, any Linux distro, any setup will work good for you as long as you have access to spin up a Docker Compose, which if we go over here into my home lab GitHub repository under media, I have spent many of a moons trying to get this as perfect and easy to use as I possibly could. There have been a ton of changes since the last iteration of this video, of this guide. I won't have time to go into everything, but we will kind of skim the Docker Compose before we get into the actual tutorial on how to do everything, which we might as well jump into that right now real quick. Change from last time is we're putting everything under a server network. People used to have problems with Docker local IP addresses changing. This kind of sets static IP addresses for all of our services, so the various services disconnecting from each other shouldn't be a problem anymore. For the services, we have Gluetun, which is what we're going to be using to manage our VPN. Within here, under ports, we pass through all the various ports that we want to actually, for the services that are going to be using this, or that we want to put behind a VPN. And you can see here, instead of having a port under the qBittorrent service, I have network mode service Gluetun, which means this container will go ahead and handle that for us. And in the documentation for this specific folder in this repo, I have a whole bunch of little explainers for some of the things that we're doing, so you can really deep dive into that if you would like to, as well as tips and tricks on how to pass through like external containers. There's a lot there. Also, for a lot of the variables here, we moved stuff to an environmental variables file, just so all that's separate. And it will automatically fill in some of these variables, such as the firewall VPN input ports, both here and anywhere else that it's going to specifically need those variables. And you can also edit the user IDs and time zones in that as well. We do have health checks for everything. So this will check the health of the service, and if it comes up as unhealthy because of a VPN disconnect or anything like that, this service will go ahead and see if it's unhealthy and automatically restart that container. Because sometimes the VPN will disconnect, it will show up as unhealthy and it won't reconnect. This will automatically restart those containers and make it so you shouldn't really run into any downtime. We have NZBGet here, which is an alternative way to go ahead and download things. Prowlarr, which handles actually finding various media. In this video, we're going to show you, or I'm going to show you an example with some free and open source content in which no matter where you are in the world is completely safe and correct to download. We have Sonarr for TV shows. And you can see here, for example, some of these have the IP addresses there, which we will be referencing later when we connect some of these applications together. We got Radarr, LiDAR for music, Bazarr, whatever, for subtitles. And really, you shouldn't need to change anything in here unless if you're doing the volumes and directory schemings differently than I am. You can see here, everything just has the same data bind mount directory, which works best for me. And then the configuration files are going to be put in a folder in the directory you run the Docker Compose with the same name as the service. Pretty simple. If I head back to the main README page for all of this, there's a whole navigation here so you can jump easily to what you're looking for. But if I scroll down here to folder mapping, this is what it's going to kind of look like here. We have that one data directory, which in the previous video just created that data directory on the root file system, gave my user access to it, which all the commands are right here. So you want to give your 1000 user read write permissions. Depending on your exact system and setup, it may be slightly different, but for me, that's just the easiest. It's super nice. You'd obviously check this with ID your user, and if you are doing this, or if all your data is hosted on a network share, whether that be the same kind of setup that we did earlier in the first part of this video series, or if you're running something like Unraid, Synology, you can follow this guide as well. This right here shows you how to go ahead and mount that with the correct permissions and all that. Additionally, like I said, most of the variables that we're actually going to want to change are in this .env file right here. So we have our time zone, your user IDs, you change those right there. And then we have a bunch of stuff for our VPN setup, which we will dive into, but first we actually need to get these files on our server. So I'm going to head back over to media, and if we go down to the compose and environmental variables, a nice little wget command, which will download both the compose and the environmental variable file. And again, there's a lot of information with all of these categories going over exactly what we're doing and why we're doing it. So I'm just gonna give that command a copy. And like I said, I do manage all of this within a Docker folder, and you can see I have Jellyfin right there. Additionally, I do have all of my data within a data folder. You can see downloads, movies, music. Just real quick, I'm going to get rid of downloads. I was testing this earlier. There we go. Now that that folder is gone, what we're going to do within our Docker directory, we are going to make a new directory that's going to host this compose stack, and I am going to call it Servar. You can call it whatever you want. That's generally what I like to do. So now let's cd into the servar directory and then paste in that wget, or the string of wget commands to grab those two files. So let's hit enter, and it'll grab both of those. Now if I go ls, you can see I have the compose YAML as well as the environmental variable file. Now probably the most important part of all of this is making sure that Gluetun, which is the service that we're going to use to manage our VPN stuff, is running properly. Now I generally use AirVPN. If you want to support the channel, there's a referral link right here and in the comments or the description down below. They've never reached out to me, sponsored the channel or anything like that. And of course they have no logs and the speeds are good. There's a lot of servers. To be quite frank, if we go over here to the GitHub wiki for Gluetun and I go to providers, I clicked on the very first one and actually did some research and really liked what I was seeing, so that's why I use that. But I will note here, if you don't use AirVPN, you don't want to sign up for it, they have a bunch of instructions for all different kinds of services. We have Proton, TorGuard, Surfshark, whatever you happen to use, there's probably something here for you. But I use AirVPN, so the guide is going to revolve around this for at least this chapter. And all you really need to do is when you're in your client portal, you just go over here to the config generator. So for here, we're going to select Linux. I'm going to go with WireGuard. It's the best protocol of the two. And I'm going to select a specific server. So let's go down to, Canada. I think I passed it. Yeah, there it is. It looks like this one right here. Sham has pretty good speeds, minimal users, so I am going to select that one for my preference and then scroll all the way to the bottom and then click on generate. Now again, I put all this stuff in a environmental variable file, so if I just type in nano.env, it's going to look a little something like this. And here you can edit your time zone and your user and group IDs. Here, input your VPN provider type. I'm going with AirVPN and WireGuard. And then right here, we have our firewall VPN input port. This is another thing we're going to need to do. If we go back to the client area here and go under the ports. So right here, we're just going to click add a new port, which it gave us this one. So now we could test open and make sure that the port is open on the server that we picked, which is right here, which it looks like it is. Good stuff. So close that out. And then I'm going to just grab this port, copy that, and then paste it in right here under the firewall VPN input ports. Now, before I put in the keys, we're going to just change the country to Canada. Again, obviously pick whatever location is best for you. This is in Vancouver. And now for this stuff right here. This is critical, so I can't really show you much, but the public key is right here. You just drop that in there. The private key is up here. You drop that in private key. The pre-shared key right here, drop it there. And then the IP address, you just copy this IPv4 address and then drop it on in like so. So real quick, I'm going to add those keys and save and close this file. And there we go. Now let's jump into this compose file just to make sure everything is looking correct. So we have the subnet 172.69.0.0. So we literally shouldn't need to make any edits to this at all. So let's output that, close it. Now before we spin this up, we want to make those download folders. So what we're going to do is head back over to this GitHub page, go to media, and if I go to directory mapping, we have right here an easy command to create the download directory scheme, which will make the qBittorrent and NZBGet folders with their respected subfolders. So let's give that a little copy, cd into the data directory that we actually want these folders to be in. So if I hit Control V, paste that in, Hit enter. It's going to make all those. So now if I ls, we can see downloads. And I think I have tree on here. So if I tree downloads, you could see what all that looks like right there. So now back into our Docker and serve our directory, we're going to spin up this compose file. And we can do that with a very simple docker compose up-d. Hit enter. It's going to go ahead and pull all of everything that we're going to need. It might take it a minute. It's quite a few different services. There we go. Creating, starting everything up. And just like that, we are good to go. So now to test and make sure that our VPN is actually up and working, there's a few different things that we could do. First, we can look at the logs, which is a very critical thing with Docker. So if we just do docker logs and then boom, like that. And we can see the public IP address is in Vancouver, British Columbia. And now there's other ways to really be sure of that. So if we go over to my little docs here, and then let's go up to the Gluetun stuff. So right here, testing Gluetun connectivity. If we just give this command a copy and then drop her on in, what this is going to do is make a little temporary kind of Linux container using the network container Gluetun. Run a ipinfo.wget command just to see what we get there. And it looks like it's spinning up just fine. And we can see that we're running from Vancouver, British Columbia. You can also test individual containers. So if you go in here and you use an external container with the network container Gluetun command or whatever, you could test those by executing into the containers. So if we get this docker execute command, and let's say we wanted to check, what's one? Let's do qBittorrent. So execute right into that, and then just run the wget ipinfo command, just like this. And you can see this is also Vancouver, British Columbia, and you could do that with as many containers as you'd like that you're passing through. So now everything's up and running, and we're going to start by setting up our download clients. Remind me of our IP address. We are on 130. So all I would do is head over here and go to that IP address. 130 and 8080 is the port for qBittorrent. So now here, the default username and password is, well, first the username is admin, and the password is randomly generated. So that is where we're again going to use the docker logs command and open up the logs for qBittorrent. You can see here that password is not set, randomly generated, this temporary password right here. So we just go ahead and give that a copy and then drop it on in under password, and boom, we're in. So let's go to settings and change that real quick. So we go to the web UI, and right here under authentication, we could change the username like so, and then change the password. So then we can save that. And just to be sure, let's just do a docker restart qBittorrent. Refresh this, and now we can log in with our new user. And now for actually setting this thing up. So we're going to go to settings, and one of the first things I do is make sure, well, let's go to connection. That port matches up with the port that we put in our environmental variable, so that is good. And then we're going to go over here to advanced, and I like to select the network interface as TON0 just to make sure that that all works. So let's go down, save that. And then really the last thing we got to do is change our directory schemes. So right here, the default save path is /downloads, but there is no just /downloads mounted to this container. So if I head on to the docs and I scroll on down to qBittorrent, we can see the default save path is data downloads qBittorrent completed. If you used that same kind of directory creation command and the same data directories, you may need to change this if you're doing something a little bit different, but we could just go ahead and drop that in. And I like to do a separate path for the incomplete torrents as well as the .torrent files. So grabbing incomplete, dropping that in, and then grabbing the .torrent files one, and then dropping this one. So there we go. We should be good to go. And to test it out, we could just grab something. Let's grab a torrent of Ubuntu desktop here. Copy link, and we'll add it just by pasting this in and then hitting download. And if everything worked correctly, we should start connecting to our seeds, and it's downloading. Beautiful. And now NZBGet. There's chapters down below. NZBGet isn't used as often. It's a whole different thing that I can't dive into. But if If you do decide to use it, there's some steps to set that up as well. NZBGet is on the port 6789, so we just change this to 6789, like that. And then we have our login prompt, so if I go back over here, I do have that available for you. The username is NZBGet, and this right here is the password. So NZBGet, boom, we're in. So first things first, just like last time, we're gonna go ahead and change our username. So I believe it's under security. There we go. So first, go ahead and change this, the control username and the control password. Scroll all the way to the bottom, save those changes, and we'll reload it. Now it's asking us to log in again, so we should be able to just put in our brand new credentials, and there we go. So now, if we go over to settings, one thing we want to do under incoming NZBs, I like to turn off the category thing because Sonarr, Radarr kind of manage all that for us. So select no, save all changes, and reload it again. And then finally, we're going to go over to settings and then go to paths, because what we're going to want to do is change our main directory, destination, and all that. And just like before, I have all those right here. So our main directory is going to be in downloads NZBGet. So drop that on in. So we'll drop that in there. It uses the flag of main directory, and then get our intermediate directory. So copy that, drop it on in, and there we go. So that's all we need to do. Let's save all those changes, reload it again, and now NZBGet is set up and ready to go to connect with all the other applications. Which, speaking of connecting, the first thing we're going to do is set up Prowlarr. Prowlarr is an indexing tool, and it's required for finding media, of course, non-copyright free media, and that is going to be at the port 9696. So let's navigate over there, 9696. Boop. And we're going to set up our authentication. So I'm going to go with the login page, put in our username and password, and then click on save. Indexers, I'm not going to be able to show you that. You're going to have to find your very own, do your research, find one that complies with your local laws and whatnot. But here under system, we have no indexers, so I'm actually going to add one real quick. And since we added the indexer, there's now no health issues. But the first thing we're going to want to do is set up our download clients in here. So if we go over to settings and download clients, you can add the clients here. So for example, NZBGet, this isn't at localhost. Using localhost, you may run into issues. So what I like to do, since it's in the Gluetun network here, we're going to want to use this IP address. So it's going to be 172.96.02. Copy that, drop that on in, and then put in your username and password. Test that real quick. We'll change the default category just to like movies. Test it. There we go. Save. Under the NZBGet settings and stuff, there's a bunch of different categories. You can configure that and play with that as much as you'd like. And then we'll go ahead and add qBittorrent. So boop, IP is within that Gluetun network, so it's going to be the same thing. And then put in your username, password, test it. We're good. Save. So now what we're going to want to do is set up our apps. Now, all these apps kind of work the same way, so I'm really only going to demonstrate setting up Radarr. All the steps are the same for Sonarr, LiDAR, so do note that. And if I recall properly, if I scroll down here, Radarr is going to be on the port 7878. So I'm going to navigate to that in a new tab, 7878. As a very similar setup thing, we're going to go forms and put in some credentials. Click on save. There we go. Not now. And here we're going to want to go under settings, general, and grab our API key. So give that a copy. Head back over here, applications. I'm going to set up Radarr. And then we're going to paste in this API key. So give that a paste. And now for the Prowlarr server, that's going to be on 2. So copy localhost, change that to 2. And then the Radarr server you could see is ending in 4. So we're going to just drop that on in and we should be good. So let's test that out. Save it. Obviously there's a lot more settings that you saw there. I recommend you reference the Sonarr wiki if you want to play with those. But there you go. We now have our apps and download clients set up in Prowlarr, so we really won't need to play around in this anymore. So let's go ahead and close this out. For Radarr, and again, the setup process is almost exactly the same. What we're going to want to do is go over here and import existing movies, start the import, and this is going to be under data and movies. So I'm going to click OK. And then it's going to scan. You can see it found those. So the first time you run this, you're going to want to kind of match it up and make sure it's correct. Which Castaway, Auto, Bugs Life, all that looks good. We could set the quality profile if we would like to, but I'm going to go ahead and import these 4 movies. So now if I go up here to movies, we can see them right there. And if I give it a little refresh, log back in, you can see we have the actual posters and stuff. So on here, you could actually go, you can see your relative path for the file, all the other files within that specific path. You can see a lot of information about the cast, the crew, alternate titles, a bunch of information here. One of the cool things about this is the renaming feature, especially on Sonarr and like series and shows. You can see right now it's Bugs Life with the year, but if I wanted to, I could go over to settings, media management, and I can enable renaming, which this will put the movie title, year, and the quality. So if I go ahead and save those changes and then go back to A Bug's Life, I could do a preview rename, which this will add that kind of WebDL 1080p. And you could configure that to look and act however you would like. But do note, depending on the service, whether that be Jellyfin Plex, they may have specific preferences for the naming of your files. I just click organize, and then you could see, boom, it went ahead and renamed that file for me. And again, with series, when you have a bunch of seasons and like 10 episodes a season, that's a very handy tool in Sonarr. And just to test it, let's go add new and get something that's completely free and that's under no copyright or anything like that. For example, The Gold Rush here by Charlie Chaplin, 1925. Now I'm going to uncheck search because I haven't added my download client, so I'm going to add that real fast. You can see it's missing. Let's go over to settings and then go to download clients, and I'm just going to throw in my torrent client really quick here. So that's not the IP ending in 2, and then username, password, test that, save it. There we go. So now if I go movies, go over to Gold Rush, search for that movie, you can see it says it's downloading, which is cool. And if we check our torrent client, you can see we're downloading 1925 Gold Rush, which this right here is the Wikipedia page for it. Which you can see here in 2021, it definitively entered the public domain as 95 years has passed since its release. And one thing that's worth noting, I just switched it out for a significantly smaller file. If we actually go over here to Radarr and we go down to settings, I believe it's under quality. You could set quality definitions. So for example, Blu-ray 720p right here, I could shift this around and say I wanted kind of the average to be about a gig an hour, and then the absolute max, or the preference to be a gig an hour, and the absolute max to be like 3.2 gigs an hour. So that's how you kind of set your file max sizes for the various formats of the media. So then all I would do is hit save changes, and then it would know if it's a Blu-ray 720p for a movie in the public domain. Of course, it will not download anything larger than these maximum limits here. And we can see data downloads, qBittorrent incomplete. We have both the Ubuntu and the Charlie Chaplin public domain movie there. And now that the download's complete, if I look in that directory again, it's not there anymore. But if I go to, actually, if I go to completed, we could see it right there. If I look in the folder, it's right there as well. And it should have copied over to data and movies. So if I ls in there, we can see the Gold Rush. And then if I cd into the Gold Rush ls, you can see the renaming scheme it did there, just how I set it up in the renaming thing. So instead of this, it's this now. Beautiful. And if I go to the Jellyfin server, which I believe is 8096, and we set this up in part 2, and then go into our movies, well, yeah, look at that. We have the Gold Rush. Awesome. Now, again, for these other services, if I cd into Docker, servar, and that's cat that compose, the same process to set up LiDAR, Sonarr, and I do have this one right here. This is for our subtitles. It requires a account at either opensubtitles.com or .net to work properly, but just to show you real quick kind of the setup process, it's at 6767. So if I go over to that 6767, here under system, we could see the status, and we're missing language profiles. So what you're going to want to do is first, let's go down here to Radarr, enable it, get the proper IP address here, which is ending in .4, drop that on in, and then grab our API key. So again, that's going to be under Settings, General, API key, and then drop that in here, test it. You see the version, so we're good to go. You have a bunch of options and stuff, but I'm not going to dive into all that right now. Click Save. And then you can see a whole bunch of stuff come up, including movies. It's syncing everything right now, seeing all the subtitles it has, and it's missing language profiles. So from there, what we want to do is go to Settings, Languages, and then I believe we're going to go to Filters and do English. I don't even have this set up all the way on my server to how I should. Save that with the filter, and we're going to add a new profile. Just call this English, I guess. Add a language, English, looks good. Hit save, and then go up here and then click save. So now we will have that language profile, and you're going to want to go to providers and enable your providers, whatever subtitle service you want to use. And when you get that set up, you could go over here and then actually find your subtitles, but it's still syncing. I don't have it all set up all the way. For this, again, the Sonarr wiki will have a whole bunch of fun stuff to go ahead and experiment and play around with all the settings. And then Bazarr has their own wiki, so then you could go under like the setup guide, and it kind of goes over some of the stuff I did, but with a lot more detail and so on and so forth. Now, the very last thing that we're going to go ahead and check out, it's not in this compose file. It's either going to be in Jellyfin or Plex, depending on the service that you're using, is Overseer or Jellyseerr. Again, depending on what you use, but Jellyseerr actually works for everything. It's just a fork. So if I go into Jellyfin, I go to compose, you can see Jellyseerr right here. If I just go ahead and grab that, I'm going to give that a copy there. And I'm actually going to throw this right into my Jellyfin compose. So if I cd back a directory and go to Jellyfin, and then I'm going to nano into that compose YAML. You can see I got Jellyseerr right there. So just paste that in, get out of there. I'm going to remove the actual folder so I can show you the process real quick. So once that's in the compose, docker compose up-d, and then it's going to pull Jellyseerr and start everything up. So now this is on the port 5055. So if I navigate to it, we have Jellyseerr. So then we pick our server of the 3 best ones. I'm going to configure Jellyfin. And then from here, we put in our Jellyfin URL, which is going to be at the same IP because it's running on the same server. And for some reason, we have to input an email address and then our username and password. So sign in. And now we will sync our libraries for movies and shows, start that scan, let it do what it needs to do. And when it's done, we could go down here and all this is fine. So I'm going to go continue. And now we're going to add Radarr. So if I add a Radarr server, this isn't in the same stack. So we're going to have to use kind of external IP. I might go ahead and just throw this in that other compose, but I'm not sure yet. Radarr. I think I will. I'm going to throw a few more services, but comment them out so you can just uncomment it if you want to use these. But we're going to need the API key real quick again. So settings, general, and then copy that, go back over here and then paste in that API key, set this as our default server, and I'm going to click on test. Once we hit test, we can select our quality profiles. So any movies, and we want it to be released. So add the server, and there we go. And then you do the same thing with Sonarr, and we could hit finish setup. So now it's going to show the stuff that I have in my server right there. And what this tool is really, really good for is you could give access to this for other users or yourself, of course. And like we could go to movies, for example, and it will show like the most popular movies. So this is really nice for media discovery, especially if you like don't have a bunch of different subscriptions to different services. We can use filters and then go down here and let's say we want to see things on Apple TV because I don't have that. I just want to see what's going on. And you could sort this by rating count, the average score. So let's go with an 8 or higher, which there's not a lot. So I'm going to go like that and move that down a little bit. And if I close out the filters here, we could see what shows up. So for example, if I'm like, ooh, Napoleon, I could go on that, somebody on this or myself, I could click request, and then it will go into Radarr. So now if I head over here, we can see Napoleon shows up. So then I could go and go to like Amazon or something, Napoleon DVD, and then we could buy it through here. I wonder if this actually lets you buy it or if you just have to watch it through their service. I hate it when they do that. I'm not sure if that's the case, but ugh. They don't have a physical copy of this at all. So very disappointing. So in that case, I wouldn't be able to go out and purchase it and put it on the server. I'm just out of luck. These companies are gatekeeping content. So yeah, that's about it. That is my Sonarr stack. One of the main reasons why this is as decent as it is because of you guys helping me out. And again, I do definitely appreciate that. If you're interested in a VPN, again, they're not a sponsor, but AirVPN is what I use. I got a little referral link. I get a little kickback. The suggestion that you check out the next part of this series, which is already live because I've only really needed to remake these first few. In the next one, which you should be able to click on screen now, we go over setting up local SSL. So instead of this being our Radarr domain, if I go like that, boop, that's my actual instance right there, r.hopkey.net/Radarr. And I show you how to do that with a whole bunch of other services, such as Nextcloud, Jellyfin, and then we go into using like TwinGate to access our local top-level domains externally. And we do Cloudflare, so if you have a dynamic IP address, you can actually enable Cloudflare, have it automatically update. It's a bunch of cool stuff. Check it out.